In the small, quiet town of Willow Creek, life moved at a slow pace. Nestled between towering snow-covered mountains and icy highways, it was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's names, but also struggled to make ends meet. For Clara Bennett, a single mother in her late 30s, life wasn't easy. She worked 2 jobs, cleaning offices during the day and stocking shelves at the local grocery store late into the night, all while raising her spirited 10-year-old daughter, Lily. Despite her best efforts, money was always tight and stress weighed heavily on her shoulders. One freezing December evening, as Clara drove home from her shift, she noticed something unusual along the highway just outside town. A line of semi-trucks sat parked on the shoulder, their headlights piercing through the thick curtain of falling snow. Curious, Clara pulled over and walked toward them. What she found broke her heart. Dozens of truck drivers stood huddled together in bulky coats, trying to keep warm. They told her they'd been stranded for hours because a sudden blizzard had shut down the interstate. No food, no warmth, and nowhere to go. Clara listened intently as one driver explained how he hadn't eaten since breakfast that morning. Another shared how his heater had stopped working hours ago, leaving him shivering inside his cab. Their story stayed with her long after she returned to her car. As she drove home, her mind raced with thoughts about what she could do to help these people. These weren't just random strangers. They were hard-working individuals who spent their lives hauling goods across the country so others could have what they needed. And yet here they were, stuck in the cold, forgotten by the world. That night, as Clara tucked Lily into bed, an idea began to form in her mind. She couldn't shake the image of those tired, hungry faces. "Mom," Lily asked sleepily, "why do you look so serious?" Clara smiled softly and kissed her forehead. "I'm thinking about doing something big, sweetheart," she replied. "Something that might help people." Though Lily didn't fully understand, she nodded and drifted off to sleep. The next morning, Clara woke up early, feeling more determined than ever. She remembered the tiny, run-down building she had inherited from her grandmother years ago. It sat empty on the edge of town, collecting dust and cobwebs. At first, she hadn't known what to do with it, but now inspiration struck like lightning. Why not turn it into a diner? A cozy little spot where stranded truckers could find hot meals and a warm place to rest? With nothing but grit and determination, Clara got to work. She called up a few friends and neighbors to ask for help. Some brought old furniture they no longer used. Others pitched in with paintbrushes and tools. Together, they transformed the dingy space into something inviting. The walls were painted a cheerful yellow, mismatched chairs surrounded sturdy wooden tables, and a hand-painted sign above the door read "Willow's Warm Welcome." It wasn't fancy, but it had character and heart. Of course, not everyone thought it was a good idea. When Clara mentioned her plans, some people raised eyebrows. "You're risking everything on this?" one of her closest friends asked skeptically. Clara understood their concerns. She was putting every last penny of her savings into buying supplies, coffee beans, canned soup, bread, and ingredients for hearty stews. But deep down, she believed in what she was doing. This wasn't just about starting a business. It was about making a difference. If she could provide even a small measure of comfort to the people passing through her town, then it would all be worth it. By the end of the first day, the diner was ready, or as ready as it could be. Clara posted handmade signs near the highway, exit directing stranded travelers to her establishment. Then, exhausted but hopeful, she went home to rest before opening her doors the following morning. Little did she know, her decision to open Willow's Warm Welcome would set off a chain reaction that would change her life, and the lives of countless others, in ways she never imagined. As Clara lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, her mind buzzed with anticipation. Would anyone show up? Would the truckers trust her enough to stop by? There were so many questions. But one thing was certain. She had taken the first step toward something bigger than herself. Tomorrow would bring answers, and maybe, just maybe, a glimmer of hope in an otherwise challenging world. The next morning, Clara woke up before the sun had even begun to rise. The air was icy and sharp, biting at her cheeks as she stepped outside. She wrapped herself in a thick coat, pulled on her gloves, and headed toward the diner with a mix of excitement and nerves swirling in her stomach. This was it, the moment she'd been working toward. Would anyone come? Could this little diner really make a difference? When she arrived, the building looked almost magical under the soft glow of the early morning light. The freshly painted yellow walls seemed to radiate warmth even in the freezing cold. Inside, the scent of coffee brewing and soup simmering filled the air. Clara had spent hours the night before preparing everything, chopping vegetables, stirring pots, and arranging mismatched mugs on the counter. It wasn't perfect, but it felt welcoming. She flipped the sign on the door to open and waited. Minutes ticked by, and for a while nothing happened. The silence pressed down on her, making her doubt herself. Maybe no one would show up. Maybe this whole idea was foolish. Just as she started to feel the weight of failure creeping in, she heard the rumble of an engine outside. Her heart leapt as she rushed to the window. A large semi-truck pulled into the parking lot, its tires crunching against the snow-covered ground. A man climbed out of the cab, his breath visible in the frosty air. He looked around cautiously before heading toward the diner. Clara quickly opened the door and greeted him with a warm smile. "Welcome," she said, trying to sound confident, despite the butterflies in her stomach. The man hesitated for a moment, glancing inside. "Is this for us?" he asked, pointing back toward his truck. His voice carried a mix of surprise and skepticism. "Yes," Clara replied firmly. "It's for anyone who needs a warm meal or a place to rest. Come on in." He nodded slowly and stepped inside, brushing snow off his boots. As he settled into a chair near the heater, Clara poured him a steaming cup of coffee and set it on the table. "On the house," she said with a grin. Then she brought over a bowl of homemade chili, piping hot and fragrant. The man stared at the food for a second, then looked up at Clara with gratitude in his eyes. "Thank you," he murmured. "You have no idea how much this means." Word spread faster than Clara expected. Over the next few hours, more trucks began pulling into the lot. Each driver came in looking weary and chilled, but left with a smile and a full belly. Some ordered meals, while others simply sat by the heater, sipping coffee and chatting with Clara. She listened intently as they shared stories about life on the road, long nights, lonely stretches, and the constant battle against unpredictable weather. These weren't just strangers passing through. They were people with families, dreams, and struggles of their own. One older driver, his face lined with years of hard work, told Clara how grateful he was to find a place like hers. "Most folks don't think about us out here," he said. "We're invisible, you know? But you saw us." His words hit Clara deeply. She realized that what she was doing wasn't just about feeding people. It was about reminding them that they mattered. As the day went on, Clara grew busier and busier. She barely had time to sit down, let alone eat anything herself. But she didn't mind. Seeing the smiles on the drivers' faces made every ounce of effort worth it. By late afternoon, though, reality started creeping back in. While the turnout was encouraging, she knew she needed more customers if she wanted to keep the diner running. Rent, utilities, and supplies didn't come cheap, and her savings were already stretched thin. That evening, after closing up shop, Clara trudged home through the snow, exhausted but hopeful. Lily was waiting for her, bundled up in a blanket on the couch. "How was it, Mom?" she asked eagerly. "It was good," Clara replied, sinking onto the couch beside her daughter. "Better than I thought it would be." She recounted the day's events, the drivers who stopped by, the stories they shared, and the gratitude they expressed. Lily listened wide-eyed, clearly proud of her mom. "Do you think it'll work?" she asked finally. "I hope so," Clara said softly. "But we'll see tomorrow." Little did she know tomorrow would bring far more than she could have imagined. The following morning, Clara woke up with renewed energy. She repeated the same routine as the day before, brewing coffee, heating soup, and setting out plates. But this time, there was a spark of confidence in her step. She believed in what she was doing, and that belief fueled her determination. By the time she unlocked the door and flipped the sign to open, the parking lot was already filling up. Trucks lined the driveway, their engines idling as drivers hopped out, eager to escape the bitter cold. Clara blinked in disbelief. Where had all these people come from? How had they found her? As the first wave of customers filed in, Clara quickly realized that word of mouth was powerful. Drivers who had visited yesterday had told their friends, who in turn told others. Before long, the diner was packed. People laughed, talked, and shared stories over steaming bowls of stew and slices of buttered bread. Clara moved between tables, refilling coffee cups and offering kind words. Despite the chaos, she felt alive, like she was exactly where she was meant to be. But it wasn't just the number of customers that amazed her. It was the sense of community forming right in front of her eyes. Strangers introduced themselves, exchanged tips for navigating icy roads, and offered advice on the best places to stop along their routes. One driver even played a song on his phone, prompting another to pull out a harmonica and join in. The room erupted in applause, and for a moment the worries of the world melted away. Clara couldn't help but marvel at how quickly things had changed. 2 days ago, she had been a single mother struggling to make ends meet. Now, she was at the center of something extraordinary, a gathering of people brought together by kindness and a shared need for connection. As the sun began to set, Clara took a moment to step outside and breathe in the crisp evening air. Looking out at the line of trucks still waiting to park, she felt a swell of emotion. This wasn't just a diner anymore. It was a lifeline, a beacon of hope in a harsh and unforgiving landscape. And as overwhelming as it all was, Clara knew one thing for sure: she was ready to take on whatever came next. By the third day, Clara's nerves had settled into a rhythm. She woke up before dawn, her body moving almost automatically as she prepared for another busy day at the diner. The exhaustion from the past 2 days still lingered in her bones, but there was a new energy driving her, an energy that came from seeing how much her little diner meant to people. She brewed coffee, chopped vegetables, and set out fresh loaves of bread on the counter. As she worked, she replayed moments from the previous day in her mind, the laughter, the stories, the gratitude. It wasn't just about feeding hungry truckers anymore. It was about creating a space where people felt seen and valued. When she opened the door that morning, the sight outside stopped her in her tracks. Trucks stretched down the road as far as she could see, their headlights cutting through the gray mist of early morning. Drivers stood near their rigs, stomping their feet to keep warm, talking among themselves. Some were already making their way toward the diner, carrying thermoses and blankets. Clara took a deep breath and stepped outside to greet them. "Morning," she called out, her voice steady despite the knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. "Come on in. Coffee's hot and we've got plenty of food." The drivers responded with nods and murmurs of thanks, filing into the diner one by one. Within minutes, the small space was packed. Chairs scraped against the floor, plates clattered, and conversations buzzed like a hive of bees. Clara moved quickly, refilling cups, delivering bowls of stew, and answering questions about the menu. Her hands were full, but her heart was fuller. Every smile, every thank you, every story shared reminded her why she'd started this in the first place. As the morning wore on, something unexpected began to happen. People weren't just coming in for meals, they were staying longer. One driver pulled out a deck of cards and started a game at a corner table. Another brought out a harmonica and began playing soft tunes that filled the room with warmth. Strangers became friends, sharing laughs and swapping tales of life on the road. For many of these men and women, Willow's warm welcome wasn't just a pit stop, it was a refuge, a place where they could pause, rest, and feel human again. Clara noticed how the atmosphere shifted throughout the day. In the beginning, most of the drivers seemed guarded, hesitant to let their guard down. But as hours passed, walls crumbled. They spoke openly about missing birthdays, anniversaries, and holidays because of their jobs. They talked about the loneliness of long nights on the highway and the frustration of dealing with bad weather and broken-down trucks. Clara listened intently, nodding along, offering words of encouragement whenever she could. One older driver, his face weathered by years of hard work, pulled Clara aside during a lull in the rush. "You don't know what this means to us," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Out here, it's easy to feel forgotten, like nobody cares. But you care. And that makes all the difference." His words struck a chord deep within her. Clara had always known that truckers played a vital role in keeping the country running. But hearing it directly from someone who lived it made her realize just how much they sacrificed. These weren't just faceless figures behind the wheel of a rig. They were fathers, mothers, sons, daughters, all doing a job that kept shelves stocked and lives moving forward. As the afternoon rolled around, the diner remained packed. Clara was grateful for the help she'd received from neighbors and friends, but even with extra hands, it was overwhelming. Plates piled up faster than they could be cleaned, and the coffee pot never seemed to stay full for more than 5 minutes. Still, Clara pushed through, fueled by the knowledge that she was providing something essential, not just food, but connection. But the real turning point came later that evening. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the parking lot, a young driver walked in clutching a guitar case. He looked nervous, glancing around at the crowded room. Clara approached him with a reassuring smile. "Hey there," she said gently. "Can I get you something to eat?" He shook his head. "Actually, I was wondering if it's okay, I'd like to play a song for everyone." Clara blinked in surprise, then nodded enthusiastically. "Of course. Go ahead." The young man settled into a corner, tuning his guitar, as curious eyes turned toward him. When he finally began to play, the entire diner fell silent. His voice was soft but powerful, filling the room with a melody that spoke of hope, resilience, and the beauty of finding light in dark places. By the end of the song, there wasn't a dry eye in the house, including Clara's. Afterward, the applause was thunderous. Drivers cheered, whistled, and clapped until their hands were sore. The young man blushed, clearly overwhelmed by the response. "Thank you," he said quietly. "This place, it means a lot to me. To all of us." Clara felt tears welling up in her eyes as she looked around the room. These people, strangers just days ago, had formed a bond that transcended the walls of her tiny diner. They weren't just customers, they were family now. And in that moment, Clara realized that Willow's warm welcome had become more than just a business. It was a lifeline, a beacon of hope in a world that often felt cold and indifferent. As the night drew to a close and the last of the drivers headed back to their trucks, Clara locked up the diner and stood outside for a moment, staring up at the star-filled sky. Her body ached and her mind buzzed with exhaustion, but her heart overflowed with gratitude. 3 days ago, she had been a single mother struggling to make ends meet. Now she was part of something bigger than herself. A movement driven by kindness, compassion, and the simple act of opening her doors to those in need. Little did she know, the best was yet to come. The 4th day started much like the others, with Clara waking up before sunrise, her body tired but her spirit unshaken. She had barely slept the night before, her mind replaying the events of the past few days over and over again. The diner had become more than she ever imagined, a place where people laughed, shared stories, and found comfort in each other's company. But as she prepared for another busy day, she couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming. She didn't know what it was or how it would happen, but deep down, she could feel it. When she arrived at Willow's warm welcome, the parking lot was already filling up with trucks. Drivers were chatting outside, their breath visible in the frosty air. Some waved at Clara as she unlocked the door, while others hurried inside to escape the biting cold. The smell of coffee and freshly baked bread greeted them as they stepped in, and soon the room buzzed with conversation and laughter. It felt like any other morning, until one driver walked in holding his phone. "Hey, boss lady," he called, out waving the device in the air. "You're famous!" Clara froze mid-pour, her hand hovering over a mug of coffee. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice tinged with confusion. The driver grinned and showed her his phone. On the screen was a video clip of the diner, taken just the night before. It showed the young musician playing his guitar, the crowd listening intently, and finally erupting into applause. Someone had posted it online, and within hours it had gone viral. Thousands of people had watched it, liking, sharing, and commenting on the heartfelt performance. The caption read, "A single mom opens a diner for stranded truckers, and look what happens next." Clara stared at the screen, her heart racing. I don't understand," she stammered. "How did this happen?" The driver chuckled. "People love your story, Clara. They see what you're doing here, and it's inspiring. You've got fans all over the country now." Word spread quickly among the drivers, and soon everyone was talking about the video. Phones buzzed constantly as more clips surfaced, footage of Clara serving meals, laughing with customers, and even helping clean tables alongside volunteers. One clip showed Lily handing out slices of pie with a shy smile, while another captured a group of drivers singing together off-key but full of joy. Each video painted a picture of a place unlike any other, a tiny diner in the middle of nowhere, that had somehow become a symbol of hope and humanity. By mid-morning, news outlets began reaching out. Reporters wanted interviews, asking Clara to share her story with the world. At first, she hesitated. She wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and the thought of cameras and microphones made her nervous. But then she remembered why she had opened the diner in the first place, to help people. If sharing her story could inspire others to act with kindness, then maybe it was worth stepping out of her comfort zone. That afternoon, a local news crew arrived at the diner. Clara greeted them warmly, explaining how everything had started with a simple idea and a lot of determination. She talked about the stranded truckers she had met on that snowy night, the challenges of running the diner, and the overwhelming support she had received from the community. As she spoke, tears welled up in her eyes, not because she was sad, but because she was overwhelmed by gratitude. This journey wasn't hers alone. It belonged to everyone who had walked through her doors, offered a helping hand, or simply shared a meal. The interview aired that evening, and the response was immediate. Messages poured in from across the country, emails, texts, and social media posts praising Clara's selflessness and generosity. People sent donations to help keep the diner running, from bags of flour and canned goods to cash contributions. Local businesses offered free supplies, and volunteers signed up to help cook, clean, and serve meals. Even the mayor of Willow Creek stopped by to congratulate Clara, calling her an inspiration to the entire town. But it wasn't just about the attention or the resources, it was about the impact. Strangers reached out to say how Clara's story had touched their lives. Some shared their own struggles, finding solace in knowing they weren't alone. Others vowed to pay it forward, promising to perform random acts of kindness in her honor. One woman wrote to say she had driven hours out of her way just to visit Willow's warm welcome and meet the woman behind the movement. "You reminded me that there's still good in the world," she said. "Thank you for that." As the days turned into weeks, the diner continued to thrive. More and more people came, not just truckers, but families, tourists, and locals alike. The once empty building was now alive with energy, its walls echoing with laughter, music, and conversation. Clara expanded the menu, adding new dishes inspired by the diverse backgrounds of her customers. She hired additional staff, including Lily, who proudly donned an apron emblazoned with the diner's logo. Together they kept the spirit of Willow's warm welcome alive, ensuring that every visitor felt welcomed and cared for. Despite the whirlwind of attention, Clara stayed grounded. She never forgot the reason she had started the diner: to provide warmth and comfort to those in need. Every morning she woke up with the same goal: to make a difference no matter how small. And every night as she locked up and headed home, she reflected on the incredible journey she had embarked upon. Looking back, Clara realized that none of this would have been possible without the people who had supported her along the way. The truckers who became friends, the neighbors who pitched in, and the strangers who believed in her vision. They had transformed a simple idea into something extraordinary, proving that when people come together with open hearts, anything is possible. And as she stood under the starlit sky, the hum of distant engines fading into the night. Clara smiled. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. She had created something beautiful, a place where kindness reigned supreme, and where even the coldest nights felt a little warmer. The fifth day felt different from the start. Clara woke up with a strange mix of emotions swirling in her chest: excitement, exhaustion, and a touch of disbelief. The diner had become more than just a place to grab a meal. It was now a hub of connection, a symbol of hope for so many people. But as she prepared for another busy day, she couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to shift again. She didn't know how or why, but the energy in the air seemed charged, like the calm before a storm. When she arrived at Willow's warm welcome, the parking lot was already packed with trucks. Drivers lounged near their rigs, chatting and sipping coffee they'd brought from home. Some waved at Clara as she stepped out of her car, while others hurried inside to escape the biting cold. Inside, the diner buzzed with activity. Plates clattered, laughter echoed off the walls, and the smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the aroma of sizzling bacon. It felt familiar, yet there was an undercurrent of anticipation that Clara couldn't quite put her finger on. As the morning wore on, the crowd grew larger than ever. People weren't just stopping by for a quick bite. They were lingering, sharing stories, and forming bonds that went beyond casual conversation. One driver pulled out a deck of cards and started a game at a corner table, drawing curious onlookers, who eventually joined in. Another group gathered around the young musician from the other night, encouraging him to play another song. His voice filled the room once again, soft yet powerful, weaving a melody that seemed to unite everyone in the space. But what truly caught Clara's attention was the growing number of visitors who weren't truckers. Families from nearby towns began showing up, eager to see the diner that had captured the nation's heart. Tourists passing through Willow Creek made detours just to stop by, snapping photos and marveling at the cozy atmosphere. Even locals who hadn't visited in years returned, bringing homemade pies and casseroles to contribute to the menu. The diner had become a magnet, drawing people together in ways Clara never could have predicted. By mid-afternoon, the diner was bursting at the seams. Every table was occupied and chairs lined the walls for those willing to stand and eat. Clara moved quickly, refilling cups, delivering plates, and greeting customers with her trademark warmth. Despite the chaos, she found herself pausing every now and then to take it all in: the laughter, the chatter, the sense of belonging that permeated the room. This wasn't just a diner anymore. It was a community, a living, breathing testament to the power of kindness. As the day drew to a close, Clara stepped outside to catch her breath. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the snow-covered parking lot. Trucks still lined the driveway, their engines idling softly. Drivers stood in small groups, talking and laughing, reluctant to leave. Clara leaned against the railing, watching them with a mix of pride and awe. These people, strangers just days ago, had formed a bond that transcended the walls of her tiny diner. They weren't just customers, they were family now. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw a man approaching, his hands shoved deep into the pockets of his coat. He looked nervous, glancing around as if unsure whether he belonged. Clara smiled warmly and gestured for him to join her. "First time here?" she asked, her tone inviting. He nodded hesitantly. "Yeah, I heard about this place on the news. Thought I'd check it out." "Well, you're welcome here," Clara said firmly. "Come on in. We've got plenty of food and even more stories to share." The man hesitated for a moment, then followed her inside. As he settled into a chair near the heater, Clara noticed the way he glanced around the room, taking in the laughter, the music, and the camaraderie. By the time she brought him a steaming bowl of stew, his expression had softened. "This is amazing," he murmured. "I've never seen anything like it." Clara smiled, though her heart ached a little. She knew that look, the one that said, "I wish I had found this sooner." Over the past few days, she had met countless people like him, individuals who carried the weight of loneliness and hardship, but found solace within the walls of Willow's warm welcome. It reminded her why she had started this journey in the first place, to create a place where no one felt invisible. As the evening wore on, Clara found herself reflecting on everything that had happened. Just 5 days ago, she had been a single mother struggling to make ends meet, wondering if she could keep going. Now, she was at the center of something extraordinary, a movement driven by compassion, connection, and the simple act of opening her doors to those in need. The diner had become more than just a business. It was a lifeline, a beacon of hope, in a world that often felt cold and indifferent, but perhaps the most surprising part of it all was the way it had changed her. Clara had always considered herself a private person, someone who preferred to keep her struggles to herself. Yet here she was, standing in the middle of a bustling diner, surrounded by people who knew her story and loved her for it. She realized that vulnerability wasn't a weakness, it was a strength. By sharing her journey, she had inspired others to do the same, creating a ripple effect of kindness that extended far beyond Willow Creek. That night, as Clara locked up the diner and headed home, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. Her body ached from the long hours and her mind buzzed with exhaustion, but her heart overflowed with joy. She thought about the drivers who had become friends, the families who had shared meals, and the strangers who had offered help without expecting anything in return. Each of them had played a role in turning her dream into reality. And as she climbed into bed, Lily curled up beside her, Clara whispered a silent thank you to whoever might be listening. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. She had created something beautiful, a place where kindness reigned supreme, and where even the coldest nights felt a little warmer. By the 6th day, life had taken on a rhythm that felt almost surreal. Clara woke up before dawn, just like she always did. But this time, there was a new kind of energy coursing through her veins. She wasn't just running a diner anymore. She was leading something much bigger. The past few days had been a whirlwind of emotions. Joy, exhaustion, disbelief, and gratitude all rolled into one. But as she stood in front of the mirror, tying her apron around her waist, she allowed herself a moment to smile. What started as a small act of kindness had grown into something transformative, for her daughter, and for countless others. When she arrived at Willow's warm welcome, the parking lot was already buzzing with activity. Trucks lined the driveway, their engines humming softly in the crisp morning air. Drivers huddled together, sharing stories and laughing over steaming cups of coffee they'd brought from home. Some waved at Clara as she unlocked the door, while others hurried inside to escape the biting cold. Inside, the diner was alive with warmth, not just from the heater but from the people who filled it. Plates clattered, laughter echoed off the walls, and the smell of freshly baked bread mingled with the aroma of sizzling bacon. It was chaotic, yes, but it was beautiful. As the morning wore on, Clara noticed something different about the crowd. It wasn't just truckers anymore, or even families and tourists. Strangers from nearby towns poured in, eager to experience the magic of Willow's warm welcome for themselves. Some came alone, looking lost or weary, while others arrived in groups, chatting excitedly about what they'd heard. Everyone wanted to be part of the story, the tiny diner that had captured the nation's heart. One man walked in carrying a guitar case, his face flushed from the cold. He introduced himself shyly and asked if he could play a song for everyone. Clara nodded enthusiastically, gesturing toward the corner where the young musician had performed just days earlier. As he began to strum, the room fell silent, captivated by the melody that filled the space. His voice was raw and heartfelt, telling a story of resilience and hope. By the end of the song, the entire diner erupted into applause, cheering until their hands were sore. But it wasn't just music that brought people together. It was the little moments. A driver helped a mother carry her toddler's stroller up the steps. A teenager volunteered to wash dishes without being asked. An elderly couple shared their table with a group of travelers who were standing near the counter. These acts of kindness, small though they might seem, created a ripple effect that spread throughout the room. People weren't just stopping by for a meal. They were leaving with a renewed sense of connection, A reminder that even in the toughest times, humanity has the power to shine brightly. As the afternoon rolled around, Clara found herself reflecting on how far she'd come. Just 6 days ago, she had been a single mother struggling to make ends meet, wondering if she could keep going. Now she was at the center of something extraordinary, a movement driven by compassion, connection, and the simple act of opening her doors to those in need. The diner had become more than just a business. It was a lifeline, a beacon of hope in a world that often felt cold and indifferent. But perhaps the most surprising part of it all was the way it had changed her. Clara had always considered herself a private person, someone who preferred to keep her struggles to herself. Yet here she was, standing in the middle of a bustling diner, surrounded by people who knew her story and loved her for it. She realized that vulnerability wasn't a weakness, it was a strength. By sharing her journey, she had inspired others to do the same, creating a ripple effect of kindness that extended far beyond Willow Creek. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Clara stepped outside to catch her breath. The parking lot was still packed with trucks, their headlights glowing softly in the twilight. Drivers stood in small groups, talking and laughing, reluctant to leave. Clara leaned against the railing, watching them with a mix of pride and awe. These people, strangers just days ago, had formed a bond that transcended the walls of her tiny diner. They weren't just customers, they were family now. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps behind her. Turning, she saw a woman approaching, her arms laden with grocery bags. "I heard you needed supplies," the woman said with a warm smile. "Figured I'd bring some things by." Clara's eyes welled up with tears as she accepted the bags. This wasn't the first time someone had shown up with donations, food, blankets, even cash contributions, but each gesture touched her deeply. It reminded her that she wasn't alone in this journey. Every meal served, every story shared, every act of kindness was a testament to the power of community. As the night drew to a close, Clara locked up the diner and headed home, her body aching from the long hours but her heart overflowing with gratitude. Lily was waiting for her, curled up on the couch with a book. "How was it today, Mom?" she asked sleepily. "It was amazing," Clara replied, sinking onto the couch beside her daughter. "Better than I ever imagined." Lily smiled, her eyes shining with pride. "You're doing something really special, Mom, something that matters." Clara pulled her close, holding her tightly. "We're doing it together," she whispered. "This isn't just my story, it's ours." As she lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, Clara thought about everything that had happened. The diner had changed her life in ways she never could have predicted. It had taught her the value of kindness, the importance of connection, and the incredible impact one person can have when they choose to open their heart to the world. She didn't know what the future held, but one thing was certain. She had created something beautiful, a place where kindness reigned supreme, and where even the coldest nights felt a little warmer. And as she drifted off to sleep, lulled by the hum of distant engines and the memory of laughter-filled conversations, Clara smiled. Life hadn't been easy, but every challenge had led her here, to a place filled with warmth, connection, and purpose. And as she looked out at the bustling diner in her mind's eye, she realized something profound. Sometimes, all it takes is one person willing to open their heart to create a ripple effect that changes the world.